Welcome to episode 57. We are in part 2 of the 4-part marriage series. If you happen to miss part 1, it's episode 56, talking all about the dangers of comparison. However, today we're talking about arguing. Listen, I'm going to be the first one to tell you we argue in our marriage. Yep. I mean, it's like any best friends do, right? You don't always get along. But I want to share with you 6 rules for arguing. They're really not rules, but I'll dive into that a little bit more when we get into the meat of the episode. But before we do that, I want to give a big shout out to Veggies Made Great for sponsoring this episode. I don't know if you guys have gotten on Veggies Made Great mailing list. Here's why I highly recommend it. I get coupons sent to me in my inbox all the time. I love it. I get their latest deals, and they have amazing deals happening on their website. Maybe you didn't even know you can actually order their products right from their site. So maybe you've been at the store and you're like me and you just can't find those banana chocolate chip muffins, or you really wanted some frittatas. You don't have to stress. Head onto their website, order as many as you want and get them shipped right to your door. You know I love these products and I love that I can order them online, pick up tons of varieties, and everyone in my house enjoys them. All right, let's dive into talking about arguing.
Welcome to the Health, Life, and More for Women podcast with certified life coach, mom of 4, and just all-around lover of all things 80s, your host, Jennifer D'Amato. Buckle in. Let's get started.
So just like I mentioned in part 1 when I was talking about comparison, there are no hard and fast rules. There is no perfect way to do a marriage. There is a perfect way for you. So, when I thought about how I wanted to name this episode, and I really did just decide to use the word rules. It might just be that these rules work for us, but within these 6 rules of arguing that we have, it might give you something to think about. It might just spark a conversation between you and your spouse. That's my whole heart behind all of these episodes, is that it sparks thought and conversation. So to come up with these rules, I sat down with my husband and we kind of had a conversation about arguing. We didn't argue about arguing, which is good, right? I mean, we're honest. We argue. We have what we lovingly call high volume discussions. I mean, we are 2 independent thinkers, fairly strong-willed people, and we're honest. We like things to be our way. We just do. And that can cause some tension and some higher volume discussions about things. Now, we do consider the other. We do want to see the other person have fulfillment, have joy, have success. We've had to learn the hard way. I mean, I'm just being honest. We've had to really learn the hard way how to talk to each other when things are not going well, how to talk to each other when we completely disagree. I'd love to tell you that we have figured this out and now we do it perfectly all the time. It's just not true. We still have high volume discussions. We still argue. However, we also still show up for this relationship each and every day. All right, so without further ado, let's dive into the 6 rules of arguing that we came up with. Number 1, don't go into the discussion, the argument, the conflict, whatever it is, trying to win. That's really a mindset piece. And I tell you, this is one that I struggled with the most early on in our marriage. I would go into the argument feeling that the only outcome that I was going to accept was that I won. Unfortunately, it made things so much worse in the argument and even after the argument. The purpose in a disagreement, in an argument, is not to win. If you go in with that mindset, someone's going to lose. And how do you feel knowing you are setting your spouse up, someone you love, somebody you care about, your friend, you're setting them up to lose? When I really did the work on this, I realized how wrong that mindset was for me. The goal is not to win. So rule number 1 is don't go into the argument trying to win. Because if you're like me, you'll do anything and everything to make sure that happens. And that could even mean tearing your spouse down, saying things you'll wish you had never said. You might even say things that really aren't true, but you say them out of anger and the desire to be the winner, which, let's be honest, you're really the loser at that point. Okay, rule number 2. Listen. Did you just laugh? You're like, I do listen. Here's what we had to learn. We had to actually listen without doing anything else because we would use the listening time, right? So we'd give each other space to talk, but we would use the time when we're supposed to really be listening to think about what we're going to say next. I would be preparing an argument against what my husband was saying in my head while he was talking. So the truth is, I really was never listening. Okay, can you just see the connection between the two problems I had? I was going into it trying to win, so why would I even listen to him? I was using that time to come up with the other side of the argument so that I would win. I was continuously keeping us in this cycle, which was getting us nowhere. And I can even remember David getting so upset because I would just keep talking. I would just keep throwing things out there. I didn't even give him time to think. I didn't give him space to contemplate because I was so hell-bent on winning, because I was thinking instead of listening. That second rule, it's really, really changed how we show up in these types of arguing, high volume discussions, is that we choose to listen. I actually have to actively turn off my brain. This is for me. I have to do this because I will go into this default mode of wanting to think of what do I say next instead of actually hearing what he's saying. I've really shifted my mindset to I want to gain deeper understanding. I don't have to agree, but I really desire to understand. All right, the third rule for arguing. It goes right hand in hand with really listening and wanting understanding. The third one is to ask questions. Clarify. Here's the thing is, I was getting caught up in this place. And David would probably, if he were sitting here, say he's been in the same place as well. Because we think we know the heart or the thoughts behind what someone's saying. Like when you've been with somebody so long, we've been together over 20 years. And it's not that we don't know each other really well. We do. We know each other really, really well. And I oftentimes, I can understand where David's coming from. He can understand where I'm coming from. But the reality is, if we don't ask those questions to clarify, we could be mistaken. We're making this big assumption that we know where it's coming from, the words that they're saying, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, why they're upset, why they're concerned, whatever that is. So ask more questions. Clarify. I mean, yes, I'm a coach. I don't coach my husband, but I will use that language. I will say, I really want to clarify what you mean when you say, because I think I know, and oftentimes I'm so dead wrong. So ask questions, clarify so that you actually have better understanding. And here's what I know as a coach. When you do this, the person you're talking to actually can articulate for themselves that deeper understanding. They even can see for themselves, where is this coming from? It actually serves both purposes. All right, so now we've gone through the first 3 rules. Before we dive into the last 3, I have something really exciting to share with you. If you haven't seen yet, I have a collection of tees, tanks, hoodies, stickers, mugs, notebooks, all on body positivity, gratitude, and self-care. If you go into the show notes, I've put a direct link to my storefront so you guys can check those products out. I am so excited to share the message of intuitive eating, of body acceptance, of body positivity with the world, and you might want to join in that. So go check out the show notes, grab the link to my storefront, find whichever shirt inspires you the most, purchase that, tag me on social media so I can share it with the world. These are so amazing, and I cannot wait to see them on you. All right, let's dive into the last 3 rules of arguing. All right, rule number 4. Now, this one is, it might be one that you don't agree with at all, but I want you to hear me out. One of the rules that we really like to honor is not to have a high volume discussion, big old fight in the bedroom. This is something that used to happen very frequently. And just take a moment and think about that. What do you like to do in the bedroom that brings you joy and pleasure and feeling connected? Is that really the same place you want to bring an argument, a heated discussion, a high volume discussion? I don't know about you, but I remember those heated discussions, those arguments. And I don't want to be thinking about that in the same place that I want to be thinking about other things. You see what I'm saying? Now, I understand it's not always possible. I get that. I really do get that. You might have little kids. You might have just children in the home at all, where you might want to protect them from hearing the details of that argument. Now, we've sometimes had to leave, sit in the car, go to the coffee shop, take a walk has been a really, really big one for us when our kids were younger, is we would discuss things, argue, whatever it was, on a walk together. So if that's possible, maybe that's something that would fit in better for you. Or we'd really have to save those arguments for when the kids were in bed. I'm talking when our kids were younger. Now, I do want to say, I feel like I should put an asterisk on this, because I just mentioned, we don't want to have these arguments in front of our kids, but the reality is it happens. And if it doesn't happen for you, holla, like that's amazing. That has not been true for us. Something my parents taught me that has always stuck with me is your kids should see the reality of marriage, but they should see both sides. So if our kids see us argue, our kids see us make up. If our kids hear us say things that are not the kindest words to one another, then they also see us apologize. It's been something that has really been important to us. Again, not perfect, but something we strive for all the time. We want our children to understand, sometimes you're going to argue. Sometimes you're going to just yell really loudly. We just say it's our Italian coming out, but the reality is we're just ticked off and mad. But they also see us hug and kiss and apologize, say we're sorry. We want them to see both sides all the time. All right, rule number 5. Timing is important. Try your absolute best not to get into an argument before you're going to sleep. We would fall into this trap all the time. And here's most of the reason why is when, your kids are younger, you're just involved with them all day, nighttime routine, and God help us. Bedtime routine used to make us want to poke our eyeballs out with a spoon. We would both be losing our crap, which of course would just feed the fact that we would get into an argument. However, it would affect our sleep. If we could even fall asleep, or we'd wake up in the middle of the night replaying that argument and then not be able to fall back asleep. And it just sets everything up the next day on the wrong note. I can remember before I got married, someone said to me, don't go to bed angry. Now, I'm going to tell you that is a great place to strive for, but sometimes you're just angry. Sometimes you're just going to bed upset. In an ideal world, would that happen, where we always kissed and made up before we went to sleep? Yes. However, that anger or being upset, not feeling, best friend-ish before you go to sleep isn't the result of an argument that happens in the bedroom, in bed, right before you go to sleep. It might be this residual leftover from the day, from something not being resolved. We really do try to not get into a big argument before we go to sleep. It's just a rule we have that really has helped us to wake up better. I mean, the reality is we both like our sleep. All right, we love our sleep. And we don't want to have anything that comes in to attack our sleep. We want to wake up feeling better. Again, it's not about being perfect in this area or any of these areas, but it's about striving for better. All right, are you ready for the last rule? Rule number 6 of having an argument with your spouse. It's okay to take a break or pause in an argument. So I can remember the first time David and I were watching the sitcom How I Met Your Mother. And if you've been around for a while, you know I am like a sitcom lover. Well, How I Met Your Mother is no exception. I freaking love that sitcom. So fantastic. There was this scene where the characters Marshall and Lily, they would get into these big arguments and they would both say pause. They would hit pause and go out to eat or have sex or go to the bar to have it, meet with their friends, whatever it was. And I loved this idea. As silly as it seemed on the sitcom, I believe this rule really can be important to utilize. So maybe you're in that situation where you notice this argument building and building, and maybe the volume is going up and you decide, hey, can we pause because the kids are going to hear us and let's just come back to this later. Or let's pause because I'm about to say something I actually don't want to say. And I'm really not even listening to you, right? I'm not really hearing you anymore. I'm in my own head. Can we just take a break and a pause and just come back to this in another hour or come back to this tomorrow? Maybe this is so you can get to sleep. Maybe this is so you can protect the kids from hearing an all-out brawl. Okay, maybe it's not a brawl, but our high-volume discussions. Maybe this is so you can show up better for yourself and for your spouse in the argument. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to take a pause. Now, I will say, I believe both people need to agree on this rule to make it work. And it doesn't mean, you're escaping the argument. It doesn't mean you're running away from it. It literally is just the pause. Like, we're going to take a commercial break here and we'll come back when we've cooled off, when we can actually show up better, when we can listen, when the circumstances are more favorable to get into this. All right, let's do a quick recap. Rule number 1 for arguing: don't go into it trying to win. Number 2, really listen. Hear what the other person is saying. Don't use the time to think about what you're going to say next. Number 3, ask clarifying questions. You think you understand, but you might not really know what the meaning is behind what they're saying. And it's okay to ask clarifying questions to gain that understanding. Number 4, as best you can, don't have arguments in the bedroom. Save the bedroom for the fun stuff. Number 5, think about the timing of the argument. Try not to have these arguments before you go to sleep. And if that means you need to use rule number 6, which is take a break, pause, get yourself together, then come back when you both can show up better for yourself and one another, then do that. So those are the 6 rules of arguing that we came up with. I just feel like I need to say one more time, this isn't about perfection. You know, David and Jennifer are not sitting over here following these 6 rules, to a T all the time. It actually doesn't even bother us if we, quote unquote, you guys can't see my air quotes again, break our own rules. Because we're not sitting there holding each other to this standard of perfection. It's just some guidelines that we like to hold so that we can continue to have a great relationship, a great marriage, and a really great friendship. It's so important to us. Now, next week, part 3 is talking about what do you do when you disagree on parenting. And so you can see how these rules of arguing are really going to possibly apply right into disagreeing on parenting. And let me give you a little hint. We've disagreed on parenting in just about every season of parenting. We still show up. I think we're freaking amazing parents. However, we don't always get it right. We don't always agree. And we're going to talk more about that next week in part 3. I hope something here in these 6 rules of arguing have sparked something in you to think about your own relationship, to think about the rules you might already have that maybe you've never considered. Wow, we kind of have this as a rule, or I really want this as a rule. I hope that there's a discussion that happens, some thought for yourself. And I really hope that if you didn't have any rules of arguing and you found yourself just in this cycle of arguing, one of these or more will really speak to your relationship and something you want to try implementing today. All right, until we meet again next week.